Hello, class. All right, in this video, I'm going to start by actually rendering the house, which is pretty difficult to see since I have most of the landscaping done. And we'll still add other things around the building in later assignments, but we'll start working on the building. And so to see it better, I'm just going to come over and turn off my landscaping layers for now. So I'm going to click and hold on that eyeball and then drag down just to turn off all the layers. And I see just the house, as it were. Now, in all honesty, a lot of times you'll use 3D modeling and 3D rendering to get a full rendering of the house. You won't have to collage everything, but I think this is really good practice to do. A, because it'll just help you practice Photoshop a little more if it's your first time at it, and B, even the best rendering, you still might need to add things or you want to change a little piece of it, and instead of going back and remodeling and re-rendering and then re-merging into photographs, just go get a photograph and do sort of similar thing like we're going to do here. So we're going to do the whole building through a collage method. That you probably won't do, but feel free to make changes to building pieces on top of 3D modeling using this. So that's why I do think it's good practice. And it is going to take a little while to get through these steps, but I think it's sort of worth it. So what I did is I found an image of a siding like I did for the rest of the assignment. I just want to go to Google really quick, and I did wood siding. Just to note, I did hit the seamless button here. That's not necessarily going to guarantee that you get a seamless texture, and that basically means when we start, we'll have to put these pieces together. Like, we just don't want that little piece of siding. We want it to be much larger than that to be the whole piece of wall of architecture. It means that picture, the left side and right side will match, the top and bottom will match, so you can sort of piece these things together. Now, Photoshop will do that piecing together automatically for you. I'll show you that in a second. But if they aren't seamless, you'll see lines every time the image repeats across the image. So you want to make sure it says texture or seamless or both to get it there. Now, the house might have vertical siding or horizontal siding. The siding might have color. All of that's easily all done in Photoshop. So I just pick a sort of spacing, a grain texture, and things like that you like. And make sure that's seamless. So I've done that. I've already opened it here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy it over. So I'm going to do Control A for select all and Control C for copy, just like we've done many times before. And I'm going to do Control V to paste this in. Now, the first thing I want to do is I want to get, I'm going to do vertical siding first for this element. And so the verticality of it's good. I'll show nearing the end of this video how to turn this into horizontal siding. But it looks a little skinnier. I want my paneling to be a little wider, so I'm going to just do Control T to scale it up, and I'm just going to scale it so approximately the width of the panels look about what I want on this sort of half of the building. I say something like that. That sounds pretty good to me, so I'll just click and double click to set it. What I'm actually going to do is temporarily, I'm just going to turn off that building layer as well. And I'm just going to select this pattern. The easiest way to do that is to come over your layer icon, push Control on your keyboard, and then click on that. You can see it's selected everything on that layer. And what we're going to do is we're going to make this a pattern so it can tile this image together wherever we want. So I'm going to go Edit, Define Pattern, and just say OK. You could give it a name. I usually don't, so I'll just say OK. And actually now it's a pattern. I don't need this anymore, so I can just delete it because I can still use this layer for the actual siding. I'm going to call it siding 1 since I'll do a horizontal siding as well. Now I'll go ahead and turn on the building layer just so I can see where I'm drawing. Now, this is not going to work in perspective. We'll have to do a few steps for perspective. But the first thing I want to do is I just want to get a wall of that siding. So I'm going to take my rectangle marquee and I'm going to make it something that's larger than the wall itself. So if I'm looking to do sort of this surface of wall, I'm going to make the rectangle bigger than it. And there you go. And what we're going to do is I'm going to go Fill Pattern. So Edit Fill, select Pattern, and then select the pattern you just made. It'll be the last one, and say OK. And there we go. We see it just fills in with all the siding. And you can see, because it's seamless, this is multiple pieces of that photograph just put side by side, but it looks all nice and coherent. So we are good there. Now we have to just play with our perspective tools to sort of get this in place. Now, again, I don't know why I'm having this problem, but my perspective tool, I just can't seem to work while I'm also recording. That tool is a newer tool. I really like it. If you follow the steps, you can probably figure it out. You might have some luck with it. Unfortunately, again, as I've said before, I'll just sort of go old school and use the perspective transform tool down here because that will work for me. So I'll select this. I'm trying to work on this wall. I know the vanishing point is off to the left. Here's the horizon line. So basically what I have to do is I just have to shrink this edge. The bottom edge is pretty easy because I can sort of follow along that bottom line of the house there and get a pretty good sense of where that perspective is. The top line is a little bit harder to do. The verticals are actually nice because verticals are vertical in perspective. So really, it's just a matter of how skinny do I want this building to be in the background. And really, if I want to make my life easier, I could always stretch it. If I want to make it feel a little more depth, I'll just make it skinnier there, and then I'll set it. Now we can see there's a few things I still need to do. I sort of made it a little too short here. That's not an issue. I'll just do Control T and hold Shift just to make it taller. I'm holding Shift to pull it down because it's a vertical siding. It won't really matter, that little bit of a stretch. And then what I'll do next is I'll have to basically cut the areas out. I want to get the areas I want to keep and delete the rest of the areas from this image. So I'm going to do Control D to deselect. What I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to temporarily hide this layer. I'm going to go up to my building layer here, and I'm going to use my magic wand, and I'm just going to select the areas that I want this siding to be in. You could do it other ways, but I'm going to select this area. I'm going to make sure my additive selection set is on right here, and because I'm just going to select the shade as well, make sure I get all of that. This is going to be horizontal, so I'll need that piece here, and I'll need this piece here. And I think that's all the vertical siding. Now this might have some vertical siding on it well, but the perspective's in the other direction, so we'll have to get that in a moment. Anyway, I have this. This is what I want to keep, right? Because it's easier to select. So now I'm going to have to invert that selection because I want to delete everything else than what I selected. So I'm going to go to my siding 1 layer, go select, inverse selection, see some minor changes there, and then delete. And when I've deleted it, we'll see we just have the siding where I want that siding to be. Now, let's talk about color for a second. Brown certainly works fine, but you can change the color. That's pretty easy to do. I'm going to show you this. I'm going to go to Image, Adjust, Hue, Saturation. Now, often this probably has enough color in it, so I could probably go and adjust the color. You can see it will pretty much adjust to most any color. If you're a little grayed out or if the color's not really adjusting well, you can always hit Colorize. That will sort of up your ability to sort of manipulate the color a bit. So I'm going to make mine a little darker, a little more saturated, just to sort of match some of the other work I've been doing. So mine's just a minor tweak to get it like that. Now I'll do it again for the other siding and use a different color, but really you can make it any color that you want, that you think makes sense. So when that color's good, I can say okay. So now I'm going to do siding 2. Let's do horizontal siding in a different color. I would make the argument that my siding looks a little wide now that I've done it, and I would argue that if I were really doing this, not for the video, I would go and delete this and try again, not make my siding quite as wide. I'd scale it down before I started, but that's okay. We can keep going. So we'll make a layer. We'll do siding 2. And again, I want to basically just fill this zone in with some horizontal siding. I guess in this zone in down here as well. So I'll make maybe an area like this. And I'm going to use that same pattern. So we'll go Edit, Fill, Pattern, and it's already set. So I can just go and delete. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to transform this, rotate it so it's horizontal siding rather than vertical. So do Control T, go to the corner and pull around, and I'll hold Shift to make sure it gets perfectly horizontal. I might have to do this in 2 pieces. We'll see how it goes. And of course, now we just need to get it in perspective. So we're just going to do the same thing as we did before. Transform, edit, transform perspective. And we can use the windowsill of that top window, get a sense, and the top line of that to get a sense that it's in perspective. And this plane seems to be in pretty good perspective there. Now, if I move this over here, You're gonna note that this plane, because it's actually sticking out, is not the same perspective of this plane because they're not flat to each other. So I am gonna have to do this in two pieces. So I pop it over here, uh, tap that off temporarily, Control D to deselect. Gonna go to my magic wand to select these areas, turn back on my siding, inverse the selection, and delete. And there we go. I've got that bit of siding there. And I'm going to change the color of this. I should have made it smaller. I don't know why I didn't do that until just now. Why don't I just see what happens if I change the scale really quickly. Somewhere on this plane, because I generally had it right, actually should be close to the right perspective. So that looks, it's hard to tell. I might have to adjust the perspective slightly. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. Edit, transform, perspective. I can make some minor adjustments. Pull that down a little bit to match that window better. See, I'm trying to point that line down. Hopefully it hits the horizon line at the right spot. I think that looks pretty good. Again, you can keep making these adjustments. I've already spent too much time for this video doing it. So actually what I'm going to try to do, see if this works. I'm going to actually duplicate this layer as well, so I can use it a second time for this piece over here. So I'll just focus on this one. I'm going to select that guy. With a magic wand, select inverse. Pick one of these sidings to delete that whole area. That looks pretty good. Siding doesn't look too large anymore. I can turn that off, and we can see I've got a second copy of it here. And what I can do is I can actually, in theory, move this over to here and probably find an area as close as I can get it to match the perspective. It's off a little bit, so I'll just re-transform and go back into perspective and make some adjustments for it to match that perspective as best I can. So I'm looking again at the sill and at this ground plane. That's pretty close. Doesn't have to be 100% perfect, but it had to be adjusted a little bit. Sort of hide that layer temporarily, go to my magic wand, select, and zoom in a little bit here. Select the area that should have siding. Select inverse, turn on my layer, and delete everything else. There we go. Now we've got siding along there. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to turn, oops, did I move that layer by accident at some point? I guess I'll just put it back into place right there. What I can do is I can keep these layers separate, or I can combine them because I want to change the color and it'll be easier to do it together. So I'm just going to hold shift on my keyboard and click on both of those layers. Then I'll right click with my mouse and say merge layers, just so it puts them all on one layer. Because what I can do is I can do the same thing to change the color. I'll go to image, adjust, mince and hue saturation, and can go to colorize to make sure I get a good color change. And I'll pull this more towards reds, make it sort of a deeper red, like that. And so there we go. I got it set. Like the color, I can always keep adjusting color as needed. If I wanted to adjust the perspective a little bit, I could still go back with just these little pieces and stretch the perspectives and trim and cut sort of as needed. And that's how you do siding. Now I haven't finished the siding entirely, but this face you would do the same thing, but you face it towards the horizon line over on this side. For any siding on here, you do the same thing. You have to go towards this side. So there we go. The other thing that you might do, there's some trim, like the trim, which is just a paint color. That's just going to be easier to paint bucket drop like we did in the last assignment. Just pick the color, paint bucket drop it in, and there you go. So what I'll do is I'm just going to pause the video and sort of clean up some of that stuff. I'll still have some holes like the bricks, also bricks/stones in another video in the windows as well. And there we go. Through the magic of editing, everything is put on the building except for the brick and the glass, which I'll do in follow-up assignments. So I'll see you in the next video.